What is going on, all you Pokemon collectomaniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and here we are with the Sun and Moon view of month-over-month movements in the top 20 cards from all the sets with booster boxes and the booster box prices themselves. Now, if you watched the Sword and Shield video yesterday, which I thought was really cool, you know, there was some glimmers of hope, right? Like, we've seen the top 20 cards get a little bit of a beating here for a while. Then we saw in December they were actually up a scotch. Then in January they were still down, but they were just barely down. Well, let me tell you something. If you were looking for hope in the top 20 cards, do not look at Sun and Moon because they are continuing to get pummeled. And one of the things we always talk about, we talked about it yesterday as well, is that products will come in and out of favor, right? There's going to be times when Sun and Moon is hot. There's going to be times when Sword and Shield is hot. I think XY and Black and White, I think, are flying under the radar a lot. I think there's going to be a time when they heat up, right? Alt arts will be hot. GX cards will be hot. Go on and on and on and on and on, right? And the whole reason I do this channel and I do all this data dives is because I want us to keep our finger on the pulse of how the market is moving. And you know, right now the Sun and Moon market is getting beat up worse than the Sword and Shield market. But also, there wasn't long ago where these Sun and Moon cards and booster boxes were just on an absolute tear. It was unreal, some of the prices that these things were going for. And we've talked about that in the past, and we'll continue to talk about it today. And we'll look at some opportunities. And, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm still not buying any Sun and Moon singles yet. Like, there's a bunch of these that I really want to have in the PC. There's a bunch of these that I think, you know, if they hit a certain price point, could have an opportunity for some great long-term price potential. But when the market has been dropping like this so consistently, it just tells me, hey, it's not the time to jump in. Now, I said consistently, so you look there in September, you'll see that the value of the top 20 cards from all these sets in Sun and Moon was $12,604, right? Then you see from September to October, it dropped 0.85%, right? It was down less than 1%. And when you look in the Sword and Shield, in the blue down below that, you'll see in that same time frame, Sword and Shield was down 6%, right? So at that point, Sun and Moon was holding its water a little bit while Sword and Shield was really coming down. But then guess what happens the next month, right? Then Sun and Moon drops 2.3%, and Sword and Shield was down 4%. So we saw an accelerated decline in Sun and Moon, and we saw it kind of back off a little bit in Sword and Shield. The next month, Sun and Moon, again, another accelerated decline, down 3.7%. Another point where Sun and Moon, or Sword and Shield actually performed better. It was actually up 1%. And then again this month, Sun and Moon is down 3.2% month over month, and Sword and Shield was actually down only 1%. Now, coming from December to January, for me, being down 1% in the Sword and Shield space is a win. But to continue to see Sun and Moon drop down another 3%, it just lets me know that, hey, I do think these cards got a little hot too fast. I do think that there was a little bit of pumping going on here in the Sun and Moon space, and they're simply starting to come back down to some prices that make more sense to me. Now, when you look at the booster box too, the booster boxes have been under a little bit of pressure as well, with the exception of December. Again, there could be some holiday spending where booster boxes really jumped up 5%. The Sun and Moon booster boxes have been under a little bit of pressure. There are so many Sun and Moon booster boxes that are in the $600 range, right? Like, we talked about some other booster boxes in the $600 range, right? Like, there's great sets from XY era that you can get their booster boxes for $500 right now. So I do think Sun and Moon saw a little bit of a pump going on there for a while. I think a little bit was kind of overinflated, overexciting, and now we're just starting to see it correct. Remember, the idea here is you want to buy what will go up, not what has gone up. And when you find stuff that you really like and the market is starting to turn a blind eye to it and it's starting to fall out of favor, that is the time that you want to spend your Poké dollars on it, right? It is really hard to make money when you're buying things constantly at all-time high prices. Now, with that being said, listen, there's a ton of data into this, right? Like, I warehouse all these individual prices. I do a ton of work on this. And in order to show that you support this channel and that you're appreciative of it, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Questions or comments, drop them down below. Those three small things go a long way in helping my channel out. Lets me know you appreciate the work that I put into this. Now, with that being said, we'll get into the very first sets right here. And I have been bearish on Cosmic Eclipse for a while now, and now I've talked about how you can still get packs pretty readily out there in the wild. I felt like Cosmic Eclipse was really, really expensive for what it contained. I mean, when you look at Cosmic Eclipse, I think 4 of the top 5 cards in the set right now from a price perspective are all full art trainers or some variant of tag team trainers. And it's not that I don't love trainer cards. It's not that I don't have a whole lot of faith in them, but we think, at least I feel like we went through a little bit of a trainer craze there for a while where the prices got really, really high. Now, when we look at the overall top 20 over the last 3 months, it's been down -4%, -6%, -5%. So really, you know, cutting out a lot of those gains that we saw earlier in the year from Cosmic Eclipse. Now, Unified Minds is a set that I'm actually really bullish on. I love the cards that are in there. I think it's a well-represented set. But again, the top 20 cards here have been coming down quite a bit. -4%, -7%, -3%. The difference for me between Cosmic Eclipse and Unified Minds is Unified Minds booster boxes are right at $600. Cosmic Eclipse booster boxes are at like $850, right? So when I say that I'm more bullish on Unified Minds, it's because I think that the buying point for the booster boxes is, you know, just a little bit more approachable right now. And I am always concerned whenever I see such a profound weakness in the top 10 of any set, hard stop. And when you look at Cosmic Eclipse and when you look at Unified Minds, it really is a bloodbath in the top 10. I think only one card from Cosmic Eclipse is in the green, only one card from Unified Minds is in the green. So this is something, again, I'm not buying any singles right now. I'm keeping an eye on it, but I do think that there might be some more depreciation to come in these sets, at least in the top 20 card space for months to come. Now, getting into the next one right here, Unbroken Bonds and Team Up. And I'm going to start with Team Up because even Team Up isn't immune from the craziness, right? 3 months ago when we looked at this, 16 of the top 20 cards were up, okay? 2 months ago when we looked at it, 9 of the top 20 cards were up, and now we've seen back-to-back months where only 3 of the top 20 cards are up. And everybody knows Team Up is like the sealed product, and actually the chase cards product of the Sun and Moon era, right? Like you've got Evolving Skies in Sword and Shield, you've got Team Up in Sun and Moon, and those Lovebird card is just absolutely insane, $730, but it has been coming down, and Team Up is, you know, it's kind of immune, nothing is immune to overall market performance really, so it'll be interesting to see where this trends, and in my mind, I always think of Team Up booster boxes as being right at that $2,000 mark, even over that, but I always go on eBay before I do these videos, and I found actually quite a few sales where it was under the $2,000 range. Now, this data has it at $1,722 for a booster box. I think that's a little optimistic, but I do think you can get them in the $1,800, $1,900 range for Team Up booster boxes, which, I mean, there wasn't long ago where I was thinking if you wanted to get one, you had to spend $2,200. All of that is a lot of money for an ultra modern booster box, but it is interesting to see how the price is fluctuating for Team Up as a whole. Now, Unbroken Bonds is another set right here. Again, the booster boxes are right around the $600 range. A lot of weakness there in the top. You know, we don't have a lot of bright spots in this video. There's just a lot of loss and depreciation in these cards. But it is interesting to see, you know, the bottom 5 cards here on Unbroken Bonds did have a relatively decent month with some gains across there. You know, not a ton, but one of them's up 14%. But outside of that, not a lot of bright spots in these top 20 cards. Now, getting into Lost Thunder and Celestial Storm. These are 2 sets that I'm really interested in. So Celestial Storm is a beast, right? Like if you saw the last video that I did when I was talking about future booster box price projections, we plotted out on a graph all of the final month prices for Celestial Storm for the last 24 months. And it was a really cool, really smooth upward into the right line. Like it was just the graph that data hounds like me absolutely dream of. It was just perfect. But the interesting thing is there is some strength at the top here, but even with that beautiful graph, the top 20 cards have still been under some pressure as of late. Now, there are some things going for Celestial Storm. As I said, the actual chase card is up. And out of all of the sets that we're looking at on the list today, there are 0 other number 1 or number 2 cards that are up except the Celestial Storm card right here. Now, when you look at Lost Thunder was really interesting. I thought about it right before I hit the record button here. Is when I think of Lost Thunder, you know, you've got that Rainbow Lugia, right? Like that's the chase there at the top. But Lost Thunder kind of reminds me of almost like a Silver Tempest set or an Astral Radiance or even a Chilling Rain. So when you look at both of these sets and go all the way down into that little orange box, that's the average price of the top 20 cards. They are almost the same. The average of the top 20 cards in Lost Thunder and the average of the top 20 cards in Celestial Storm is almost the same. The difference is Lost Thunder has that average value spread out between more cards. Celestial Storm, a lot of that value is concentrated in the chase card and the number 2 card, right? Like the chase card there is $165. The number 2 card is $114. In Lost Thunder, the chase card, that Lugia, is $146. Then you get to 74, 66, 62, 59. And that's a pattern that we see in those sets, like especially in Chilling Rain, like the Blaziken. Don't shake a fist at it. It's like a $180 card. But when you compare it to some other sets in the Sword and Shield era, you got Fusion Strike, you got Lost Origin, you got Evolving Skies. They have those big chase cards, which are up over $230, $240. So it's going to be interesting to see how these sets compare. And will Silver Tempest and will these sets kind of flow the way Lost Thunder has? Now, Lost Thunder isn't in the $600 range. I think it might be a little bit of an undervalued booster box. But again, outside of the Lugia, I just don't have a lot of of love for the other cards that are in this set. Now, I did months ago, the ETB for Lost Thunder was at 150 bucks. Womp womp. I said I was going to buy it. I didn't buy it. I missed out, and now it's all the way up in the $200 range. So I'm sure we all have moments like that. But thinking about Lost Thunder and the cards that are in it and how it compares, especially from a pricing perspective, to Sword and Shield sets, kind of got my brain going. And so I might have to do some more data dives on that in the future. Now, next one's right here, Forbidden Light and Ultra Prism. And I talked about this with Cosmic Eclipse, but all 6 of the top cards in Ultra Prism are trainer cards. And I do think we got a little trainer happy there for a while. I think there was the Japanese cards, obviously there's a different pull rate, like their art is on fire, like they're just feverish over there for these full art trainers. So I think that some of that excitement transcended over into the US market, and we got a little crazy ourselves too. I know I certainly did. I've got a ton of trainers behind me. I love them for the PC, but who knows if they'll be great long-term buy and holds. But I do worry about that from an Ultra Prism perspective. Now, obviously the chase card in Ultra Prism is like one of the ultimates from the entire Sun and Moon era, but it is interesting to see that all 6 up there are the trainer cards. Now, speaking of chase cards, the Forbidden Light chase card has been getting crushed. It was down 11%, down 8%, down 8%. It is absolutely fascinating to look at that. Now, remember, we were just talking about Celestial Storm, right? And the average of the top 20 cards, the cost of that was $39. The average of the top 20 cards was $39. Then you look at Ultra Prism right here. The average of the top 20 cards in Ultra Prism is $60, right? So it's very interesting to see the difference between these two sets. So the average of the top 20 price in Ultra Prism is $20 higher than the average of the Celestial Storm, yet their price from a booster box perspective is exactly the same. So for me, it's going to be interesting to see how the chase card in Ultra Prism holds on. We've seen where single big chase cards can certainly propel, the sealed product and just the set as a whole in the future. So something interesting to look at, and now that we've been doing this long enough, I'm really starting to draw some interesting comparisons between the Sun and Moon era and the Sword and Shield era. Now, getting into the next ones right here, we have Crimson Invasions and Burning Shadows, and I call it out, there's not a lot to be excited about here. I'm obviously a naturally excitable guy, and I always try and bring some energy, but for this slide, when I was looking at it, when I was doing my little mental rehearsals, there was just not a lot to get excited about. Crimson Invasion, 6 years old, doesn't have a single card over $35. Like, that is just ouch city right there. Burning Shadows booster boxes have been doing okay. That Chase Zard in there, I think that's proof that a really, really great Zard Chase card, even if the rest of the set isn't entirely, on fire, I think that's enough to kind of propel a set into future price appreciation. Booster boxes are going for around $450. That Zard is over 350 bucks right now, and it's been holding strong. When we see a lot of these price changes and fluctuations, some have these big swings up, big swings down. This Zard has been relatively consistent over the last 3 months, so it does seem to be a little bit immune to the fluctuations going on. But Charizard's the big dog, right? So I'm not surprised to see that, but Burning Shadows has been doing okay, only down 1% month over month when we've seen a lot of sets perform a whole lot worse. Now, the final two right here, Guardian Rising and Sun and Moon, and I'm actually a little bit sad, and I almost turned that green 0 at the very bottom of Guardian Rising to red simply for continuity. But out of all the sets that we've looked at from the entire Sun and Moon era, from a month over month perspective, yes, Guardian Rising's top 20 is actually up. Not up enough to register as a full 1% up, so it's only up a couple bucks. But guess what? Green is green, so it is up. The other 11 are down. And then the Lily from Sun and Moon, hey, I talked about some trainers. I love these older sets too. So the Lily gave back some of the gains last month. She was up 20% month over month, so she still has retained a lot of that growth, but it is down 7% month over month. And listen, when I look at these last 4 sets here, again, you're talking about a completely, totally different era on a multitude of different levels. But when I think about just the cards, forget about the prices, just think about the lineups for these first 4 sets from Sun and Moon. I keep that in the back of my mind when I'm looking at the lineups for these first 4 sets in Scarlet and Violet. We don't have another Burning Shadows. We don't have another huge chase card like that. But I do think we have some great trainer cards. I think the Iono, I think the Miriam are really, really great. And I think the Miriam's under a lot of pressure in Scarlet and Violet base. So when I'm thinking about how Scarlet and Violet is, I always try and think about the first 4 sets from Sun and Moon and the first 4 sets from Sword and Shield. And it gives me some idea of what's coming up. I'm incredibly excited for year 2 of Scarlet and Violet, simply because year 2 and year 3 is when things get really, really exciting. Now, I always give you a little bit of my takeaways. So listen, are Sun and Moon singles going to stay under pressure? I think so. I really do. I think we're going to continue to see some weakness here in the Sun and Moon space. For me, it's not the time to pull the trigger. There's a lot that are out of reach for me a while ago, and even though they're coming down in price, just for me, I'm not in any kind of hurry. I do this data every single month. I get a look at it. I share it with you all. So I think that there will be some indicator that the market starts to hit some sort of bottom, or that things are starting to get, to turn into more in favor. And when I start to feel that momentum shift, maybe that's when I'll start looking at picking some stuff up. And then Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon, I do think that we're seeing Sun and Moon hit that rough patch. Everybody's kind of fallen out of favor on that. I think a lot of people are diverting their attention into the Sword and Shield space. I think those alt arts have a very bright future ahead of them, and they've been under a ton of pressure for the last 6 months. So is this the time where those start to turn around? I don't know, but it sure seems like the market is still devaluing Sun and Moon, and they're starting to get really excited about Sword and Shield. And then, I got to talk about this. Not many people make it to the end of the video, but I'll tell you this, from my sports card collecting career, I've done it for 20 years. I do go through long periods of time where prices are stagnant and they're flat. And I'm not saying that that's the era that we're about to enter into the Pokemon space, but I'm also not saying that's not going to happen. Like, I don't know, my crystal ball doesn't work, but I will say this, when we do hit those periods where prices are flat for a long period of time, that's a great time to build core positions, right? When I shared with you my investment video, I talked about, I have this core and explore philosophy, right? Like, I always want to focus on the core, and then the explore side of things is where I can have a little fun. So if we do hit a period where things are flat, I will be building my core positions and spending a little time seeing if I can explore and pick up maybe some of these Sun and Moon singles that I've always wanted but just have never pulled the trigger on. So with all that being said, tons of information on this video. I hope you found value in it. Listen, if you enjoy the content and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button yet. Questions or comments, drop them down below. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. As always, I appreciate you more than I can possibly say. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an epic one. See you, everybody. Bye.